everybody, this is Tim from Seagate Wines, and I'm back with the next part of our video series. This is going to be about tasting. So we're going to walk through basically what to look for, how to find it, and how to express it when you're actually talking about wine, as there actually is a preferred language that sommeliers use in order to describe wine so that everyone around them knows exactly what they're talking about. So it's a little bit in depth, so we're going to get to it really quickly. So first of all, let's look for aromas. So as we talked about in our first part of the series, you only have 4 senses of taste, which is salt, sour, bitter, and sweet. But you have over 10,000 scents and aromas that your nose can detect. So your nose is very important when you are trying to figure out how to taste wines. So just quickly running through some of these. Wine is going to differ in its aromas based on the grape variety and where it comes from and the temperature that it grows in, and there's a lot of factors. But there are certain things that you can always look for in certain wines that will always sort of find their way back. So we'll quickly run through some of these flavors. So looking at white wines, for example, you're always going to seem to find, depending on where these are from and which grape variety it is, things like banana, melon, pineapple, lemon, grapefruit, green apple, red apple, peaches, apricot, even cherry. Smells of fresh cut grass and green vegetal aromas. Baker's yeast, the lees, the smell of the lees that are left in the wine that they age and mature on. Honey, yogurt, kind of a lactic acid smell. Violets, orange blossom, rose, geranium. Those are kind of the floral aromas. And then things come from more from the oak, in oak aged wines, things like caramel, honey, butterscotch, butter, even soy sauce, chocolate, or molasses. The fuller bodied a white wine gets, it tend to go from those tart flavors to rich flavors, more tropical fruit flavors. There are like basically 4 white wine styles. There's crisp, then the next would be like kind of like a sleek kind of style, and then softer, and at the end would be rich, which has got that full malolactic fermentation at the end that actually brings these dairy flavors together. So we classify white wines according to each of these wine styles, and then we progress from light into full bodied. Now, red wine, you're going to have a whole other set of aromas. Things like vanilla, cedar, oak. Obviously, oak is an easy one because it's matured in oak. But there'll be other wood flavors, things like hazelnut, almond, walnuts, fig, prune, raisin, dry cherries, medicinal smells even. Things like you see a lot, flavors of like menthol, eucalyptus, especially in Australian Shiraz. A lot of eucalyptus in wines like that. But you'll also get bacon, coffee, burnt toast. Those are the smoky flavors from the charring of the barrels. Then your fruit flavors, black currant, blackberry, strawberry, raspberries, cherries. Even things like licorice or black pepper or cloves, baking spices. And then into things that are not necessarily as desirable: tar, plastic, kerosene, diesel, even rubber. One of my favorites from the Somm series, the Somm movie series, is fresh cut garden hose. These are smells that you don't necessarily really think should be there. And as red wines get fuller bodied, the aromas tend to go from the earth to red fruit to vanilla and dark fruit. Okay? So we're going to start at the beginning with earthy, and then it would become more fruity, then mellow, and then very bold. Things like your extremely punchy, heavy ripened Zinfandels and California Cabernets. They're very big and very bold. And the same thing, we classify red wines according to those same wine styles, and they will progress from lighter to full-bodied. Now, there's also undesirable aromas, things that will kind of give you an idea that maybe that wine is faulted. Smells like green bean, asparagus, green olives, black olives, artichokes, alcohol, like heavy alcohol smells, methanol, menthol, white vinegar, sulfide dioxide, burnt matches, cabbage, garlic, rotten eggs, wet dog or wet wool, mushrooms, dust. You know, those smells, they tend to be things that you don't necessarily want in your wine. And the causes are either from poor winemaking, a bad product, or from contaminated corks. And there is a huge debate about cork versus Stelvin screw top, and we'll talk about that in another episode. But for the courses of today, let's just talk about how it actually affects the flavors of the wine. So I'm going to show you right now, we're going to look at the Master Sommelier grid. So this grid basically is what you need to know in order to identify a wine without actually having the wine in front of you. Just someone pours you a glass of wine, you should be able to identify what that wine is. So let's have a look at the grid right now. So in this diagram, you can see the tasting grid as it sits. Now this is pretty much the exact grid that you would use when you're taking your sommelier's exam. And then you obviously wouldn't have the answers on the right side of each section. These are just what the answers should be if you're explaining a different wine. So they will change obviously from white to red, from sparklings or rosés, and each of your descriptors should be consistent with what they're looking for here. So learning how to taste also involves learning what the language is and what is being universally recognized as being the right terminology for each individual aspect of tasting in these wines. And as you go, you'll get more familiar with it, and you'll learn a little bit more about how to actually make sure that it's the right words that you're choosing so people know what you're talking about. So now that you've seen the tasting grid and you kind of have an idea of what it is we're looking at, let's taste the wines, and we'll go through the grid one piece at a time so you can understand how it works. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to take our glass of wine. Lovely product shot. So the first thing we're going to judge is going to be sight. So we'll go through the whole sight block, and we start with clarity. You know, when you're checking wine, you want to have a white background or something very neutral so you can actually see it very, very well and see if there's anything in this that would trigger you right away to know whether or not you're not going to enjoy this. So we're going to start with the top. So clarity, whether it has any visible sediment or anything in it. This is definitely a clear wine, very crystal clear. Its concentration is probably a pale to a pale medium as it's gotten on a little bit in its age. This is 2017 Albarino. So normally Albarino would be like maybe a 5 to 7 year max lifespan, and we're in like year 3-4. So this has definitely moved into closer to the medium from its color. Next color would be, is it a white, is it pale white, is it straw, is it yellow, is it gold? Well, this one I would say is between like a pale color to straw. It's not super golden, but it is definitely moving into the golden realm. Are there secondary colors? Yes, I do believe that, you know, it is got a little bit of greenish flint, greenish tinges and stuff on the edges. Not necessarily fading to the rim, but it definitely does have a little bit of a greenish hue that is on the edges of this glass. It's extract. For white, you don't really need to worry about extract because we're not extracting anything from the skin, so the staining of the glass is not going to happen from a white wine. Are there any evidence of gas? No, there's not at all. There's no bubbles. There's no any sort of effervescence or anything that shouldn't be there. It's very, very clean. Next, we go into the block that's called the nose. So we spend a little bit of time working through it and just, to open it up a little bit, get a little bit of air into it and let those scents come out. So does it smell clean or does it smell faulty? It's definitely very, very clean. We're not smelling any of those, bad things that you would look for. There's no smells of oxidization or, acetate, like, the nail polish remover. There's none of that happening here. It's definitely very, very clean. Its intensity, as it's a little bit warmer. So it's somewhere between delicate to moderate. It's not a huge punch in the face, but it definitely has some very lovely aromas that are coming up out of the glass. Age assessment. So is it a youthful wine? Is it a developing wine? Or is it an old wine? And I would say this wine is definitely in the development stage. It has moved itself past its very early, youthful, sharp flavors and moved into some more creamy flavors, a little bit fuller body. Fruit. So what fruit are we smelling? Always apples. You're always going to get apples out of Albarino. I definitely get green apple out of this, but moving towards like a red apple. It's a little bit sweeter than normal fresh Albarino would be. And also some tropical fruits. Definitely getting some tropical things like papaya out of this as well. Maybe even mango. Actually, definitely mango. The fruit characteristics. Is it ripe? Is it fresh? Tart? Are they baked, stewed, dried, bruised, jammy? Well, this one for me definitely is fresh. It's quite a nice, sharp, fresh taste or fresh aroma that's coming out of this. But it does have some interesting secondary notes that are non-fruit, and that's the next one. So the next line is the non-fruit flow things, and to me it's kind of it's got some floral qualities to it, almost like herbs, and definitely warm spices like clove. You'll definitely get some good warm spice out of this. But you're not getting any of the other things. There's no barnyard, there's no animal smells or petrol, or there's no smells of fermentation, those yeasty smells. We don't get any of that. Is there earth in this? I'm not getting any dirt smells, no like forest floor, compost, mushroom smells. We're not getting any of that out of this at all. It's much more clean, much fresher than that. But the next line, minerality. We're definitely getting minerality out of this. If you know anything about where this comes from, in Rías Baixas is the designation of origin inside the province of Galicia in Spain. It's very, very cool, and the ground is made of pretty much of solid granite. And everywhere you go, all of the structures, all of the buildings, everything is made out of granite. They even trellis the vines on big stone, like big granite pillars, in order to keep them up off the ground so that the wind can keep them dry. So you're gonna get a lot of granite, stone smells out of this, and it's what makes Albarino really, really special. The next one would be wood, and there is absolutely no wood aromas of this. It's a stainless steel fermented wine, so you're not gonna get any wood aromas out of it at all. Next, we move to the palate and actually start to taste the wine. So the first thing is to get it into your mouth and move it around so that it covers all the different parts of your mouth. And then breathe in through your mouth, out through your nose. And it explodes in flavor. So is it sweet? No, of course it's not sweet. It's definitely a dry wine. Is it bone dry? I don't think that it is bone dry. It's definitely leaning closer to dry than bone dry. As it's getting older, it's getting a little bit more unctuous than it would be if it was a fresh one, where it could be a little bit more bone dry if it was fresh. Its fruit flavors, without question, it is full of apple. I mean, green apple leading to red apple, and even some of the same smells that you got earlier. So some of your tropical fruit smells, but it's so leaning very heavy into the apple flavors. Its fruit characters, I would say they're definitely fresh fruit characters leading into almost dried fruit characters, just because the wine is getting a little bit older. So we are getting that same nuance of the fruit in multiple stages. The non-fruit flavors, still, again, you are getting some of that spice, a little clovey kind of spice, but I'm not getting a whole lot of other spice flavors out of that. Perhaps a touch of floral, like white flowers. You tend to get a little touch of that. Definitely no earth. There's no mushrooms, compost, forest floor. None of that is in this wine. Minerality, absolutely. You're gonna get that heavy granite stone minerality that's coming into all of the wines that are coming out of this region. And lastly would be the wood. And no, there is no wood in this at all, because it's never touched wood. If it does have any wood flavors at this point, it would be a fault, and you probably don't want to finish drinking that wine. Next would be the palate. Is this wine bitter on your tongue? And I would say no, it's got no bitterness to it at all. Does it have any tannin? Well, for white wines, probably not. They don't really have, you don't really have problems with tannin in white wine. So I would say no, low to none tannin in this wine. Acid, it does have good acidity. So I would say medium to medium plus on the acidity. It would have been medium plus for sure when it was first released, if not higher in the high acidity. You kind of don't want to push the boundaries too much on acidity unless you find a way to keep it completely in balance. Alcohol, I would say alcohol is, low to low medium. It is not a very high alcohol wine. It's only 12.5% alcohol. Notoriously in Galicia, they have issues with ripening of grapes because of the cool weather, and it's quite wet as well. The body of the wine, is it a light, medium, or full-bodied wine? Well, to me, I would say this is probably light leading to medium. It's kind of a cross. As it's getting older, it's picking up a little bit more body and losing some acidity. So I would say light medium on this one. Texture, it definitely has taken on a nice creamy rounded texture. As it's maturing, it's becoming a much bigger wine than when it was first released. The balance, are there any elements that dominate? And I would say no. I feel like this wine is very, very well balanced between its acidity and its minerality, its the texture of it, the alcohol. Nothing is really jumping out at me. It's all very, very, very well balanced. Its length or its finish, I would say that this is definitely in the medium range for length, because it does linger in your mouth for quite a long time, at least 30 seconds or more. You can still be getting aromas of it off of your tongue. Complexity, I think it's become a much more complex wine now that it's got a few years of age on it than when it was first released. So I would say this is definitely a medium to medium minus complexity of wine. If it had, for example, been aged on its lees for a year or two, then you would see much more complexity out of this wine, but it's not meant to be that. It is what it is, and I love it for what it is. So from this, we have to come to our conclusions. So your initial conclusions, you have to decide what are your possible grape varieties if you're tasting this blind. And you could, obviously it's going to be white, it's going to be something that's acidic, something that is known from cold weather, because it's obviously not super ripe. So you would put your possible grape varieties. For me, it would be either Albarino or maybe even Sauvignon Blanc that's not from New Zealand, because they're so distinctive from New Zealand. Is it Old World? Is it New World? I would say definitely it's Old World. Because if you come to that conclusion that it's not New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc, and then you think it could be a Sauvignon Blanc, it might be something from Italy. in the Friuli, Veneto, Alto Adige area, they do make Sauvignon Blancs that have similar flavor qualities to this. What is the climate? Obviously, this is a cool climate wine. You can taste it right away that it's a cool climate wine because it's not super ripe. And then you would have to figure out which countries and narrow that down. What is the age range? Well, I would say it's, you could tell that it's a wine that was made as a fresh wine that has matured slightly. So definitely in that 3-year age range. And then you come to your final conclusion. And this is where, as a sommelier, this is where all your experience and all your knowledge comes to play, where you have to name what that grape is, what variety is in that glass. You have to say what country it came from, what region or appellation it was made in, what is the quality of it? Is it a Premier Cru, a Reserve, a Grand Reserve? You have to name it, and then you have to name the year it was made. This is what makes being a master sommelier so difficult. It's so hard to pass this exam because you have no idea what they're going to put in front of you. So your flavor memory has to be so rich and so deep, full of knowledge, that you can pull any wine ever made out of the top of your head and actually name it on your exam. Now, for us at home, we don't have to do that. We just have to enjoy it. But what we can do is we can enjoy it a little bit more when we know how to taste it properly and how to look for good things that we like and things that we don't like. Because you're always going to have a much better wine experience when you're buying wines that you know right away are probably right in your wheelhouse. But what we'd also like to do with these little tidbits that we're trying to give you is expand your horizons of what grapes are out there that you will enjoy. If you go to a restaurant and you always say, well, I'll just have a Pinot Grigio, is it because you really like Pinot Grigio, or is it because it's the only one you feel really comfortable that you're not going to dislike it? Because you're really limiting what your enjoyment level is going to be if that is the case. What I would always suggest to people is practice, learn, figure out what it is you like about wine, and then you can go to a restaurant that has a big wine list, and you can say, hey, no, I don't want Pinot Grigio today. I want a Gruner Veltliner, or I want an Albarino, or I want a Verdejo. And you can walk through all of these different wine varietals from around the world and really learn to enjoy them and not be stuck inside the same glass of Pinot Grigio that you've had 600,000 times. The reality is, wine is travel. Every time you sip a glass of wine, you get transported to a place or a time. It's all history. It's all about culture and, the lifeblood of a people. And that, for us, has always been the best part about wine traveling. We've visited so many places and been to hundreds and hundreds of wineries, and each one has a unique story and each one has a unique product. And their stories are what make the product so special. So hopefully over the course of the next few weeks, we can tell you some stories and we can make your wine experience a little bit more special. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you again next time. Cheers.